Good morning there. Shall we wait for the latecomers or we just go on? Anyway, thank you all for coming to class in such bad weather. Perseverance through wind and rain will eventually lead you to success. Trust me, okay. Today, we're gonna talk about Chapter 7 of the WTO law. Chapter 7, as you can see, the name of the title of Chapter 7 is Rules on Unfair Trade. Actually, I don't quite understand why would you choose to come to the class at the last minute. You can always come a little bit earlier, right? Okay. The title of Chapter 7 is Rules on Unfair Trade. It is another chapter concerning the substantive rules of the WTO law. What are the two other chapters we've learned about the substantive rules? What are they? Chapter 5 is about rules on, yes, non-discrimination. Good. Non-discrimination. And Chapter 6 is about rules on barriers. Good. We'd better call it trade barriers. Okay, good. And here comes Chapter 7 about unfair trade. And Chapter 8 is about the exceptions. Of course, the exceptions to all these three chapters. Okay. Unfair trade is not an unfamiliar topic for you because we've already talked about it in the course of the general theory on international economic law, right? Yes. So what is composed of unfair trade? Unfair trade includes, the practice of doing business, the practice of trade. First type of unfair trade would be dumping, right? Dumping. And what's the other type of unfair trade? Good. But it's read as subsidization. Okay. Subsidization. These two are the practices of unfair trade. And we've talked a lot about these two practices of trade, right? Including the substantive conditions for a WTO member to impose anti-dumping duties or countervailing duties. And what are the anti-dumping duties and countervailing duties composed of? Something like that. Therefore, in this chapter, we will not talk about them in detail. I'll just give you a general idea about unfair trade because we don't have too much time for this and we've got only 3 weeks to go in the coming days, okay? So, as usual, I've got several questions about this topic. The first concept you need to know is, yes, these two are two practices of trade. But there is one common word to describe these two trade practices. What is it? I'll give you a hint. For example, maybe in the year before last, in 2023-ish, there is an academy established. It's called the Window Academy of Trade Remedies. You still got the memory of that? In Chinese, it's called 温州贸易救济研究院, a Window Academy of Unfair Trade. Oh, sorry, Trade Remedies. Trade Remedies. So, whenever we are talking about trade remedies, we are talking about unfair trade, dumping, and subsidization. Trade remedies. Okay. What about safeguard measures? Is the term safeguard measures also part of the trade remedies? Safeguard measures. Yes or no? No. Safeguard measures does not belong to a trade remedy. No. There are only two. Okay? Okay, then next important question would be, what is the relationship between trade remedy and trade liberalization? As you all know, the ultimate goal of the WTO law is to pursue free trade, or to put it another way, trade liberalization. Then what is the relationship between trade remedy and liberalization? To put it another way, how can trade remedy bring good to trade liberalization? If we have trade remedy, then we will gradually realize the objective of trade liberalization. How? Okay, the answer is like this. Trade remedy. What are trade remedies? What are trade remedies? Listen, trade remedies, this term is different from these two. They are related to each other, but you cannot say they are the same. Trade remedies are acts taken against dumping and subsidization. Trade remedies are actions taken against dumping and subsidization. Okay? Good. Then, how can trade remedies contribute to trade liberalization? The answer is like this: to ensure equal competition between dumped or subsidized imports and like domestic products by leveling the playing field. To ensure equal competition between the imports and the domestic products. That's how. Okay. Let's move on. What's this page about? Okay, let's move on. Look here. WTO law does not regulate dumping itself. What does that mean? We've got WTO rules, right? We've got GATT 1994, and we've also got anti-dumping agreement. These two agreements are both about dumping. These are the WTO law. My question is, does WTO law regulate dumping itself? No. Then what does WTO law regulate? It regulates not this one, but this. WTO law does not regulate dumping, but regulate trade remedies, actions taken against dumping. Okay? Good. Then let's make it more detailed. In which aspects can WTO members violate Article 6 of the GATT 1994 and the anti-dumping agreement? In which specific aspects can the members violate the WTO law? In this context, it means Article 6. GATT 1994 Article 6 and the anti-dumping agreement. In which aspects can WTO members violate these two? The answer lies here. Anti-dumping investigations, the imposition and collection of anti-dumping duties. That's the specific content or aspect. Okay. Then let's recall something we've learned before. What are the three substantive conditions or requirements for a WTO member to take anti-dumping measures? 3 requirements. For example, I'll give you an example. There is dumping for imports from the United States to China. The United States is dumping its products to China. Then, at this time, China will investigate this dumping. And then, under what circumstances or on what conditions can China impose anti-dumping measures? There must be some requirements or conditions, right? What are the requirements? You still remember? 3, right? I think yes, this appeared in the exam, final exam of that course. What are they? First, there is dumping. Yes or no? Second would be, what's the second requirement? Actually, the answer is here. Not this part. The domestic industry. China's domestic industry is suffering, right? Suffering. What kind of suffering? Suffering from what? Material injury. You still got that? Yes, good. In Chinese, it's called 实质损害. What's the third requirement? There is a causal link between these two, right? Causal link. Good. There is a causal link between these two, which means the dumping caused the material injury. That's the 3 requirements or conditions for a WTO member to adopt anti-dumping measures. Okay. And this kind of anti-dumping measures is called a trade remedy. Okay, it's called a trade remedy. And let's continue to recall how to determine the margin of dumping. Margin of dumping. By the way, what's the result of your ping pong contest?
No.
Have you been awarded a gold medal, a silver medal, or a bronze medal?
No, it's too hard to get.
Okay, anyway, as long as you tried, okay. Then the margin of dumping, how to calculate the margin of dumping. I'll give you an example. Okay? Look, there is a normal value here. Normal value. The normal value is $100. If the price of the imports is set at $80. Then what is the margin of dumping? I mean the selling price, sales price. Or the import price. The import price or the sales price is set at $80. What is the margin of dumping? The margin of dumping would be $100 minus $80 equals $20. Is it correct? $20? No. The margin is a percentage. That it would be so it would be 20%. That is the margin of dumping. Okay, that is the margin of dumping, 20%. Then my next question would be, when we are imposing anti-dumping duty, can the anti-dumping duty exceed this 20% margin? Yes or no? No. You can never impose an anti-dumping duty that exceeds 20%. That's not a lot. Because it's called trade remedy, 救济, not punishment or penalty, not something like that. It's just a remedy. So we just make it even. We just impose a tariff rate of 20%. Next comes the difficult part. Look, there is a technical term appeared. It's called non-market economy. What's the economic regime for China? It's called, would you like to have a try? Sorry. Anybody knows and volunteer what is the economic regime for China? It's called 中国特色社会主义市场经济. Then how to say it in English? Socialist market economy with Chinese characteristics. Okay? Okay. Then, so, is China's economic regime a non-market economy? Of course not. China is, of course, market economy, just with the Chinese characteristics. Okay? You need to know that. So when we are negotiating with the United States, we can always say we are a market economy. Okay? Good. Then, what if a country is not a market economy, is a non-market economy? There would be something different about the calculation of a normal value. If a country is a market economy, then the normal value would be the normal value. If a country is a non-market economy, then the comparable prices would become what? You still remember? A third country. Yeah? We call it what? Yeah. We call it an analog country. Analog country. Analog country. Or the costs of production in the exporting country. You have the memory of that? Or the costs of production in the exporting country. Which one prevails the other? Which one comes first? No. Their relationship is either. There's no order. Okay. Then, there are two concepts. One is non-market economy. The other is analog country method. It's about the calculation of the normal value. Next comes another rather important but difficult concept. It confused me for long. Finally, I get to know, I get to understand it, and I'm very happy to share it with you. The concept is called zeroing. What does zeroing mean? Rather complex. Zeroing is something appearing in the calculation of the margin of dumping. Margin of dumping. What does it mean? I'll give you an example. For example, China is importing bottles from the United States. There may be different importers in China, right? Importer 1, importer 2, importer 3. And there are so many exporters in the United States. Exporter A, exporter B, exporter C. And between exporter A and importer 1, there may be not just one transaction. Yes or no? So many transactions, okay? And there are so many transactions between the importers and the importers. Then, when we are calculating the dumping margin, what numbers do we use? Which transaction? Between which exporter and which importer? That becomes complex. Yes, when we are talking about the definition of dumping margin, this sales price is always lower than the normal value $100. But in practice, in reality, this sales price prices are not always lower than $100, the normal value. There are always those lower than the normal value, and there are those that are higher than the normal value. When we are calculating the margin of dumping, everything should be included. That's fair, right? That is the fair practice. But when it is called zeroing, things changed. When the practice of zeroing happens, those will be omitted, will be zeroed. Zeroed. So what's the consequence of the result of the margin of dumping? It will be higher or lower if we zero the higher ones. The weighted or the average margin of dumping would be lower or higher? Huh? Lower or higher? Higher, right? Good. Would be higher. So that would be and this disadvantage to the exporting country. Yes? The margin is large, is higher. So that would be a disadvantage to the exporting country. Yes? That's what we call zeroing. It's a method, it's a practice of calculating dumping margin. What's the consequence? What's the legal consequence of zeroing? Zeroing artificially inflates the magnitude of dumping, resulting in the determination of a larger overall dumping margin and permitting the imposition of a higher anti-dumping duty. Okay, good. About anti-dumping, that's everything I'd like to talk about. I think that's enough. Okay. Then let's move on to the other type of unfair trade. It's called subsidization. Subsidization, section 2. First important concept is how many categories of subsidies are there? There are 3 types of subsidies. The first important type would be prohibited subsidies. What does prohibited mean? Something not allowed. Something not allowed. Then, what is included in prohibited subsidies? Look here. Article 3 of the SCM agreement explicitly prohibits, number 1, export subsidies. Number 2, import substitution subsidies. It confused me. What does export subsidies mean? Okay, here. Meaning subsidies that are contingent means rested on, relied on. Export performance. And this one, meaning subsidies that are contingent upon the use of domestic over imported products. What does that mean? Okay, let's come back to a comparison between dumping and subsidization at first. Then, just now I mentioned, does WTO law regulate dumping? No, right? Then, a similar question would be, does WTO law, of course, it's another agreement, okay? Does WTO law regulate subsidization itself? Yes or no? At this time, it would be yes. Yes. WTO law can regulate subsidization directly. And at the same time, WTO law also regulates the subsidization investigations, the imposition and collection of countervailing duties, everything. The important one is that subsidization is subject to WTO law regulation. What does that mean? It means, for example, I'm a government of a country and I subsidized some companies or corporations. This practice may violate WTO law directly, and the WTO law can regulate this practice. Even if, because I'm a government body, right? I'm subsidizing, and I'm subject to the WTO law regulation directly. And the dumping, who's dumping? Private businessmen, exporters, right? Can WTO law regulate the behaviors of private businessmen directly? No. But when we're talking about subsidization, who is the subject of subsidization? Government. And that's why the subsidization can be subject to WTO law regulation. Okay? Yeah. That's the first type of subsidies. Then what are the two other categories of subsidies? If you have previewed the content, you'd know. The second type would be actionable subsidies. Actionable. Actionable subsidies. And the third type would be non-actionable. But, you know, actually prohibited subsidies belongs to actionable subsidies. So strictly speaking, there are only two types. One is actionable subsidies. The other is non-actionable subsidies. In this type, it includes prohibited subsidies. Okay? Only two types. subsidy. Then, if it is actionable subsidies, then this kind of subsidies can be subject to WTO dispute settlement. Yes or no? Yes, because it's actionable. So you can always challenge this practice of subsidization before the WTO dispute settlement mechanism. What about dumping? Can the practice of dumping be challenged before WTO dispute settlement? Yes or no? No. Good. Then what kind of behaviors can be subject to WTO dispute settlement? The trade remedies, including the dumping investigations, the imposition and the collection of anti-dumping duties. These actions can be subject to WTO dispute settlement. Because these trade remedies are actions taken by governments. Okay? Take a break of 5 minutes, and we'll come back later.